Peter Schein, you're so welcome to the Happier at Work podcast. Your second time to be a guest, so I'm really delighted to have you back and talking about your latest book. Do you want to give people a little bit of an introduction, who you are, and maybe a brief overview about the book and what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, yeah. It's wonderful to be back. It's nice to see you again. And my name's Peter Schein. I spent the last 6 years or so working with my father, Ed Schein, who passed away in January, but you know, we worked all the way to the end, and
Brilliant.
so he's at rest, and
Yes.
but you know, kept driving and contributing until the very end, which
Amazing.
I think
Amazing.
how
Yeah.
we all should strive for that. So
Yes, absolutely.
um, so that was in January, and this year, two works of his and ours come out. And the first one is this book, Career Anchors Reimagined. Let me try to get there we go.
Yeah.
Um, and so this is the fifth edition of a book that was based on some research that was done in the 70s. Well, actually, 60s through 80s is probably more
Yeah, I was
accurate.
going to say, because I remember when I was kind of looking at my career and trying to understand things, that would have been a really old research paper that popped up in the search results, I think is how I first came across it.
Right. And the idea of the research was that Ed and his colleagues are social scientists. And so rather than applying a sort of a personality test to a career arc, it was, let's have a panel and let's track how people's careers evolved over a number of years. And the thing that's great and is also challenging about that kind of research is that you have to maintain the panel, and
Yes.
you know, time is your friend, because it's all about what's happened over that, you know, 5 year
Mm.
block
Yeah.
of career choices. Or so that research turned into a finding that there are some anchors that people optimize around in the career choices that they make.
Mm.
And in the original panel, there were five anchors, and in the current work, they evolved that. Ed and the other author, John Van Manen, evolved that to become eight anchors
Mm.
over the last couple editions of the book. And in this new edition, we've sort of changed the format, and we've changed the way we present those anchors, those eight things that you optimize for. And I'll just give you briefly a description of what
Yeah.
anchors are. Is
Yeah.
they're sort of talents, abilities, and skills.
Yeah.
So that's sort of in a traditional career assessment or a career counseling, that's what you tend to focus on.
Yeah.
Um, because, you know, why are you doing this? Well, you might be looking for a new job, or you might be looking for a pivot or
Mm.
something. So you need to
Yeah.
kind of have that mindfulness of who you are.
This is it.
But right, but it's also what do you want and what do you
Yeah.
need? So
Mm.
that creates a set of, you know, dimensions that influence the way you make career decisions. And again, the career anchors idea is that it creates a visual for you to understand the choices that you've made, not just who you are, but how does that relate to the choices that you've made?
Mm.
Because we you know, are at any point in our career, we make good choices and we make bad choices.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
I can
nobody's
relate.
perfect.
I can relate.
And
Yeah.
so it's very important to sort of balance all of those things. And the way the book works is you respond to 32 prompts,
Mm.
and that then allows you to sort of see a pattern around the choices that you've made. And then you also respond to 32 prompts around what you think you need to be, how you think you need to grow, what you
Mm.
think you want to do.
Yeah.
And so you end up getting this picture of who I am today based on the career decisions I've made. Who do I think I need to be based on, you know, changes in my life, or different aspirations, or whatever.
Mm.
So it's a combination of accumulated work that and choices that you've made that become a guide,
Yeah.
but also a constraint.
Okay.
One of the things that I wanted to do in sort of recreating this book was recognize that anchors are both that. We think of a boat
Mm,
anchor as
yeah.
this thing that doesn't move. But career anchors are not just a restraint in that sense, but they're also a guide. And so uh, I like to spend time on the water and happen to know about the concept of the sea anchor or
Okay.
drogue,
Yeah.
which if you've ever been out in the water and you put out a sea anchor or a drogue, it stabilizes you. If things get really rough, the drogue, helps maintain your direction,
Mm,
because the wind and the waves will take you anywhere. Well, the
yeah.
drogue, the sea anchor, in this sense, the career anchor kind of gives you a guide in turbulent times. So the whole idea of the book is that you have a visual for, what your anchors or what your sea anchor looks like,
Yeah.
so that as you're making decisions, you can recognize who you are, how you've made decisions in the past, and what you need to optimize for as you make career choices.
Brilliant. I love that. And something that kind of sprung to mind, and it was from a conversation on a previous podcast episode um, with Ian, all about the idea of the towards move and an away move. So I think if you can describe where you've been and where you'd like to get to, the aim is to make a towards move towards what you want rather
Right,
than an away move away from what it is that you really want. And using that framework should help you to be able to do that.
right, right.
Mm, brilliant. Love that. Do you want to talk us through what the 8 anchors actually are?
Sure. Um, so this, just to give a little bit more on the arc of the book too.
Yeah.
And if I promise I will get to the 8 anchors, but I do want to kind of,
We'll keep
um,
people listening a few minutes longer.
yeah, yeah. So the thing is, with a lot of our books, we would sort of encourage people to sort of, maybe read the final chapter first, or flip around and find what's in. With this book, we kind of want you to go through it 1 through 8.
Yeah.
We want you to go through the book linearly, because the first thing we talk about is how much work has changed in the last, I mean, just the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly since the last edition of this book, um, a lot of things have changed, and we're all familiar with terms like the Great Resignation, or hybrid work, or all of those things that are fundamentally different than certainly the original panelists for this work would never have imagined that you might live in a country that has a 4-day work week, or you
Yeah.
might
Yeah. Yeah.
or you might only really be asked to be in the office 3 days a week.
Yeah.
I mean, those things were inconceivable. Um, uh, so, uh, so we kind of recognize that there have been a bunch of really tough challenges for people managing their careers over the last, certainly the pandemic, and economic impact of the pandemic has changed things a lot. So we sort of level set on that and ask you to sort of, write some reflections about how, the last 5 years have impacted you. The next thing that we do is very important, in that our view is that you don't make career choices in the vacuum, in a
Yeah.
sort of an individual bubble.
Mm,
You're always making it in the context of relationships that you have in your life,
yeah.
or in your work. So you
Mm,
may be following in the path of a mentor. So you are not making career choices without some sense of what that mentor had done,
mm,
or might do, or would advise you to do.
yeah.
So we ask you to build a relationship map and think about the people who influence, how you live your life,
Mm,
what choices you make, what you value, and be very conscious of how you are making career decisions in that relational context. And we apply our relationship theory that, you know, essentially goes from exploitative relationships to transactional relationships to personal relationships to intimate relationships. And in you making your relationship map, we want you to be very conscious of, are there transactional relationships that should be personal relationships in order to help you make better career decisions? And again, we talk through how to do this relationship mapping and how to think about those different levels of relationships that may, you know, help or hinder the choices that you want to make.
Yeah, I love that as an idea, as a concept, because it's so true. We don't just make a choice for ourselves. We do consider the other people that we have in our lives as well, whether that is someone who's a mentor or whether it's the personal relationships that we want to maintain. So you might choose to go and work in a specific place because it has flexible options, for example, because you have
Right.
other people in your life that you need to take care of. So it's, yeah, I love that idea. It's not just kind of a selfish thing that this is why we're choosing to do this particular career, but actually it exists within a wider context of the relationships that we have in our life.
Right. Right.
I love that.
So then, um, so we go through that, and again, we're trying to sort of build mindfulness or careerfulness, right?
Careerfulness. You heard
uh,
it here first.
at the danger of coining another bit of jargon in English language, but
This is it, yeah.
um, so then the thing that was always very important in the history of this work was the interview,
Okay.
where you and a colleague, you and a partner, you and a friend, or as I wanted to say in this work, you and Zoom, or you and a mirror, or you and a phone, um, any sort of device that would allow you to effectively be explaining yourself to another person.
Mm,
And again, you could do it looking into a Zoom camera, and we give you a interview prompts,
yeah.
ask you to describe this, that, and, you know, choices here, you know, where'd you go to college? Did you go to college? You
Mm,
know, how did you make, so you build this set of insights, and it's probably better to do it with another person,
yeah.
but you don't have to. You
Yeah.
can do this as an individual exercise.
And
Uh,
it's essentially a way of explaining the choices that you've made rather
eh,
than being like, say, a job interview, for example. It's more about explaining, well, what made, why did you do this, or why didn't you do that?
right,
Mm,
exactly. And when you force yourself to articulate it, you know, you understand yourself better,
yeah.
right? It's very easy to sort of, you know, go through the questions in your head,
Yeah.
but we really want you to do it with a friend,
Yeah.
or do it with yourself, but actually go through and verbalize, you know, the choices you've made. And then you can go back and transcribe the recording and say, oh, yeah, I guess that's right. I really did do this,
Mm,
even if I thought I was doing that.
yeah. 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 It's amazing the different results or the different things that you get rather than thinking about things in your head, even versus writing down, but versus verbalizing it and trying to explain and maybe justify why you did
Right.
certain things. I think it does make a huge difference. I think just getting it out there rather than
Yeah.
being stuck in your head all the time.
Right. And you can play a lot of tricks on yourself when you're stuck in your head all the time. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I did this because of this. And then when you actually talk about it, and
Yeah.
maybe someone even prompts you or they kind of question, well, is that really the case? Or, when you're actually talking to someone else rather than talking to your phone or talking on Zoom or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. You've got
It's a
someone else to
tricky
hold you
dynamic
accountable.
too, because you know, you don't want to spend your whole time justifying, because your partner who's going through the questionnaire is getting sort of judgy, right? it's not supposed to be kind of a normative exercise. It's
Yeah,
supposed
yeah,
to
yeah.
be a socialization exercise.
Okay,
You
okay.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
if all you can come up with is a bunch of wrong choices you've made, well, you might as well give up. No,
There's always something to be
they're
learned.
not
Yeah, yeah,
wrong
yeah.
choices. They are just
Judgment-free
choices.
zone. Yeah, yeah. Love
So,
it.
and so then after the interview, then we say, all right, now we can start talking about the anchors.
Okay, yeah,
And
yeah.
and
So you
and
don't
we
even know about what they are until you go through that interview process.
right, right. Well, actually, wait, is that right?
Or
It's
maybe you don't
I
have
think
that much detail.
I think we tried to not get people too focused on the anchors. Well, I should add one other thing. We did have there's a chapter that's sort of theory about the internal career versus the external career. So
Okay.
there really is who you are versus what your resume says you are.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's just important to be mindful of that distinction. Um,
Can we explore that topic a minute?
yeah,
I mean that kind of really resonates with me, and I'm thinking not just resume, I'm thinking LinkedIn, and oftentimes when I'm talking to people for the first time, I won't necessarily go and read their LinkedIn because I want to hear their experience in their own words and why they made choices. And
right.
I'm not going to, on my LinkedIn, explicitly say why I took one job or left another job because, there could be personal reasons associated with those. And there are. So when I'm
Yeah.
talking to someone, I kind of explain my career history in a very different way than what you would ever see on my resume or what you would ever see on my LinkedIn profile as well.
Right. Right. I mean, I think it's very true because, and I think with LinkedIn in particular, knowing that the audience for it is much, is way up and to the right of what your, traditional, 1 or 2 page CV, that LinkedIn's a completely, it's a market. And it's
Yeah,
explicitly that. And
yeah,
you may not have thought of your paper resume as your, the door of your store,
yeah,
your storefront. But
yeah,
it really is.
mm,
And I guess the good news about LinkedIn and sites like that is that you realize there's nowhere to hide.
yeah,
I need to represent myself.
mm,
But a lot of what this book is about is maybe drawing, drawing it closer to what your actual internal career is,
mm,
so that you're not always, continually feeling like you're putting lipstick on the pig, or you're not just over representing things that is just typical in LinkedIn profiles or resumes, that you're
yeah,
over representing some things and not others. And um, you know, people who are hiring, get that. They can read
yeah,
through that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
The humans have a very good bullshit meter.
exactly.
And
Yeah, yeah,
we didn't, it didn't, it's been there for a while.
yeah,
It wasn't created with LinkedIn.
yeah,
And so, so that's just being that building that consciousness of that internal versus external.
yeah.
Uh,
No, I think
uh,
it's really important. And presumably it brings you closer to something that you really want to do in that case as well. So again, whatever history you have is not necessarily what you want to do internally, but I think oftentimes people fall into a career and they just continue in that career because it's what they've always done. And you get to a stage where you think it's too late to change now, and what skills do I have, and I can't change industry. There's all of these things that go on in people's heads, I think, which is, it's not true in a lot of cases. I think there are, there's a lot of transferable skills that you can take from one industry to another, and I think it should be encouraged to do that as well.
I think that's absolutely right. And if we can help, you know, people be happier at work by having a little bit more of this sort of sense of, I am who I am, and I just now have a better visual for who I am.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We were talking earlier, it's very common that people know their Myers-Briggs type
Yes.
indicator
Yeah.
profile.
Yeah.
Um, I tend to think of that one as being a little bit reductive,
Yeah.
that, that may become more of a constraint than an enabler.
It puts you
If it
into a
gets, if
box
it,
and
yeah, and
yeah.
if those four walls are walls, not doors,
Yeah.
then that
This
may
is
not
what
be
you
helpful.
should do because you have this label.
Right.
You're more likely to be this. I mean, don't get me started on Myers Briggs because what I learned about it, and I've used it over the years, and I've got different results. So this made a lot of sense when they told me when I was doing my masters. Myers Briggs, it's not, it fails the test retest. So if you take the test again, you'll oftentimes get a different answer, which is not really conducive to something that's really strongly scientifically backed. But I do know my Myers Briggs, and it helps to explain a lot. I think I
Yeah.
always thought of it as a kind of a scale. So people who would perceive me as more extroverted, perhaps they're more introverted than I am, because I always come up. Well, sorry, one exception. I think I came up as an E for extroversion, but one time I came up, or sorry, most of the time I come up as an I, but that's not how I'm perceived by other people. But that could be in my own frame of reference because they're more introverted and so they perceive me as being more extroverted. So more of a scale and relational type of scenario rather than you're in this box and that's kind of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we should think of Myers-Briggs or the Clifton Strengths Finder, which is a very common tool, or career anchors, as we have to think of these as scales,
Yeah.
not not
Not definite. Yeah.
levels,
Boxes or
or
whatever
not.
labels. Yeah. Yeah.
They have to be thought of as, yeah, and they're sort of continua, right?
Yeah.
They're not just a point, they're a point on a scale.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's probably more realistic, it's a range on a scale.
Yeah. 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 And
Um,
perhaps even at a point in time as well. So
yeah,
does it change over time? Yeah, maybe it doesn't change over time, or maybe it does. Um,
I mean, I guess our view would be, the career anchors evolve. They may not change dramatically,
yeah,
but I think if you did this 10 years ago and did it 10 years from now, your pattern might look a little bit different.
mm,
And the other thing that's different about this edition of our book compared to previous editions is, in the past, it was your career anchor is. So there would be a top one, and then there would be seven in declining order underneath that top one.
yeah,
And I think we all, my father, Ed, and John, and I all agreed that's not really right.
okay,
But I was a little bit more vehement in saying I hated the way that was presented,
okay, yeah, yeah,
because I know that I'm not, and it's partly because, and I'll talk through the anchors, but it's partly because I didn't really like that image of myself, that was my anchor.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so again, the idea in this book is that we present the anchors on a spider web or a radar scale, and then your pattern around those 8 dimensions is sort of the image that you have. It's not what's my one anchor, because what's my one anchor is a little bit more like what's my MBTI,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it's not that simple, just like
mm,
we were saying.
yeah,
So what are these anchors? I'll just read through them quickly.
yeah,
The first one is technical functional.
okay,
So are you somebody who is, deeply involved in a specialized, um, uh, specialized profession, a particular kind of engineering,
mm,
or, you're a a pediatric neurosurgeon or something. It's a highly, and it might be something that you have to maintain a credential in. You may have to do boards every few years, or you might have to, you know, be tested to confirm this technical functional skill. And there are a lot of people out there, particularly where I live in Silicon Valley, who have a very strong technical functional foundation.
Yeah.
So again, things that are interesting around that foundation and not other things is what you would optimize for if your primary, anchor is technical functional.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Next one is autonomy, right? So you have said to yourself, in all the career decisions I've made, what I really value is my autonomy.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different than technical functional, where that tends to combine the external and internal career pretty, transparently, right? Right. It took a long time to become a pediatric neurosurgeon, and people sort of understand that is an extremely specialized skill.
Yeah.
Whereas it might be harder to sort of understand that you optimized for autonomy in the
Yeah.
career decisions you made.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the other hand, maybe you're an independent accountant, and
I
you
was thinking,
realize
or
it
maybe
wasn't the
traveling,
accounting.
traveling sales or something like that, where
Yeah,
you're kind of responsible for yourself essentially.
right.
Mm.
And so you had the opportunity to join a big firm, and you said, I value my autonomy more than that.
Yeah.
So you optimize around that choice. So the next one is it was actually one of the newer anchors, called challenge and risk, is how we label it. But it's basically, you don't ever want to be too comfortable doing, something that's simple. You always have
Okay.
to be finding something that is, sort of boil the ocean hard.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
you're sort of a risk junkie.
Yeah.
Um, so a friend many, many years ago was a financial, capital markets financial instrument trader, and was given the opportunity to become a manager in that same, department or whatever.
Yeah.
No, it was the challenge
Yeah.
of, your life on the line with every trade you make.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was what motivated him. He didn't want to
Yeah.
manage other people doing that. He wanted to,
Can I
be
just commend the self awareness around that though? Because I think a lot of people chase after that title. So it's really great to have that level of self awareness to say, I don't want to go for that title. I'm happy doing this day to day.
and that is exactly right. And I would like to think in 2023, the world has embraced that idea.
Mm.
But when this research started at the Sloan School at MIT, Business School at MIT, Ed and other people working on it knew that those people were all going to say, I want to be the boss. I want to
Yes.
be the general manager.
Yeah.
I'm at business school because I want to be a CEO.
Yeah.
I think we've moved past that. And
Yeah.
they discovered in their research that if, 9 out of 10 of their panelists said that, by the time they got to 20 years later, less than half of them were actually still saying they wanted to be the CEO.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Right? It's not, CEOs are pretty rarefied. Not everybody's
Yeah.
going to want to be or able to be the CEO.
Exactly. Yeah. This
Um,
is it.
so then there's entrepreneurial creativity, which is a little bit like autonomy, but here it's you may want to be the boss. You want to be creating something new, but what it is, which might be more the technical functional anchor, is less important than you want to be creating something new.
Mm.
And always, it's again, out here in Silicon Valley, there's the concept of the serial entrepreneur. And it kind of characterizes what this is, that you optimize for new chances to build something. But once it gets to a certain size, you're going to bail and go on to the next one
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because you're just too much of a builder.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be a sustainer. You
Okay.
just want to be always building something new.
Yeah.
Then there's the general management anchor that I kind of implicitly referred to a couple minutes ago, where you're making decisions around, I just want to build my organization. I want to be, the boss of more people. I want to be a C-level in an organization. And I
Mm.
don't really care what we do or how we do it. That's my aspiration, is to be that
Yeah.
general management boss. And again, I think in the 50s through 80s, maybe generally business schools in the US anyway, we're sort of training people on
Mm.
that track.
Yeah.
But we all
Yeah.
know, it's even then, not everybody was going to be on that track. People were going to have other interests. They were going to optimize for other things.
Yeah.
Um, so then there's a service anchor, and this is also one of the newer ones where people realize in themselves that what they're really optimizing for is ways to serve other people. So this might be somebody in the medical profession or any of the different ways of service that gets expressed through our complicated healthcare systems. But it also might be somebody who is more important or is more interested in important sort of environmental issues
Okay.
than they are a different kind of technology or a different kind of uh, work lifestyle or
Mm.
work style. So they optimize around wanting to serve others or serve other causes. Um, there's a couple more that are related, and then I think if you have your 8, I've got them
That's
all. You've got
6 I
6
have so
now. Yeah.
far. I have 6. Yeah.
So then there are 2 anchors that sound similar, but they're kind of not. One is we call it stability and security, and that is that you make career decisions as a way of maintaining your personal status quo or maintaining your personal sense of security and stability, because you don't crave change. You don't, or you may have many people dependent on you and just realize you can't take on a lot of risk. So you're optimizing around that sense of security. You know that your salary is going to take you out this many years, or it's some people optimize for that. And then the last one is it was created as one of the later anchors, was called lifestyle. And we realized it's not lifestyle. It's that, and I think again in 2023, I think we're much more cognizant of this idea that most people are optimizing their personal and their professional lives.
Yeah.
The idea of somebody who's just 110% professional and sort of you know the train wreck of personal behind them doesn't matter because they're just all about their profession. I think the pandemic sort of got us over that a
Yeah,
little.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's much more of a
uh,
blend, I think, between work
yeah,
and life these days,
right.
especially with hybrid opportunities, remote working and things like that. I think there's much more of an opportunity to do that. And maybe in the past, I'm kind of thinking in the past, maybe people wouldn't have had or thought they didn't have that option for more of a lifestyle type of career choice, but now they do.
Yes, and I think it's embracing it as life work integration.
Yeah.
And so, true confession, when I did this a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago or something, my anchor was lifestyle, and I thought, geez, I've been working pretty hard. I don't know why is that?
Yeah.
But I recognize it in what I was motivated for and what I valued. It did involve my kids. It did involve the things that I like doing that aren't just work. It's not everybody, but I think we're finding that that post-pandemic, I think we kind of got real that,
Mm.
we're all trying to survive this thing,
Yeah.
and we're all trying to protect our families, and we're all trying to protect the people we love. And um, so, maybe how we, think about climbing the corporate ladder is a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And make different choices essentially, I think.
Yeah.
But no, that's shed some really great light, and I'm kind of reading through them thinking, well, there's a few that I could relate to. So I'm going to have to go and get the book now and go through
Yeah.
and kind of understand it in a little bit more detail. I think you've provided some information there, but I think for me and for anyone who's making choices in their career, and I think you were talking earlier about career pivot. But for me, I think what I'm seeing more and more is people taking responsibility for managing their careers, where previously we were kind of reliant on our organizations to present opportunities to us. I see a lot more people taking full responsibility for their careers, whether they're looking for opportunities internally or externally. So I think something like this is really valuable for understanding the choices that they've made up to now and maybe the direction that they want to go in next.
Right. And so we would view this as it's sort of a project to go through with yourself, and maybe with your partner or spouse or a close colleague at work,
Yeah.
and go through and do it, and consider it another way of having more insight to who you are and what you want to be. Put it next to your Myers-Briggs, or if you've done the Clifton Strengths Assessment, put it next to that. In fact, there's an appendix in this book that compares what your career anchors might be if your Clifton Strengths look like this.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'd
Or
be curious to see that because I
so,
do have my Clifton strengths as well. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
So think of it as uh, as just another way of having a little bit better insight into yourself.
Yeah.
And we also set it up so that it asks you about the assessment part of it, which is all online, by the way. You buy the book and you understand how the assessment works, but you're given a certificate to go online and then do it, and that creates your spider web. And your
Brilliant.
spider web is not just your anchors, which is decisions you have made, but it's also how you want to grow.
Yeah.
So we ask you 32 questions in each category, and then you get a different pattern for the choices you have made, and maybe how you would try to optimize for the choices that you will make.
Brilliant.
And with that, I also want to mention that in the final chapter, we reprint the famous Robert Frost poem, um, "The Road Not Taken," I guess is what it's
Two.
called.
Yeah.
And
Two.
yeah,
Yeah. I think that's what
I,
I was
I,
like. Two
I
roads
should,
diverge in a yellow wood. I
yeah,
always remember the first line, but I'm like, what is that the name
right.
of the poem?
The road not taken,
The
right.
road not taken.
And
Yeah.
two roads diverge in yellow wood.
Yeah.
And so we reprint that, and because we sort of want you to sort of say, okay, I've gone through this thing, and now there's this great poem. Why are they throwing this great poem at me?
Yeah.
Well, it's because it's a poem that can be interpreted as either, go out there and be an individual and take the road not taken. But if you read the poem carefully, it raises this idea that maybe the traveler in this poem has made a horrible mistake.
Yeah.
And it wasn't this great American go out and be an individual and take the road not taken. Maybe that was a horrible mistake. And that's how careers are. You come to a road, diverge in a yellow
Mm.
wood. Um, and maybe the one with the right path was the road that was trodden, not the one that was untrodden. Because so, but be aware of when you've made the right decisions and maybe when you've made the wrong decisions. And it may not be something that wrong decision may not have had any catastrophic impact on your career, but it might have. And it's
Yeah.
just being mindful of those mistakes
Mm.
will help you not make as many in the future.
Exactly. And for me, I always like to think of it as a learning opportunity. So anything that has gone horribly wrong in the past, it's more of an opportunity to understand more about myself, to grow in self awareness. And so, if anyone is listening today and they're thinking, I'm in that situation now where, how can I get out of this situation? Think about what you can learn from it about yourself and what you want and what you might do differently next time.
Right. And it's not just who you are, but it's what you've done and
Yes.
how that is influenced by and influences the people around you.
Yes.
Your
Oh,
career is
yeah.
always
Mm.
contextual, it's never individual.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, because, when we were talking earlier, we were talking kind of about how the relationships influence you, but you're so right. The career choices you make influence those around you as well.
Right.
Yeah. So, Peter, if people want to find out more about you, if they want to buy the book, what's the best place that they can go?
Sure. Well, the book is available, on all the online resellers. And it's published by Wiley, which is, a big academic publisher. So pretty easy to get a hold of it. It's about, I don't know what the latest Amazon price is, but it's sort of $25, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good stuff.
And it changes every day. So, um,
This is it.
uh, and to get in touch with me, our organization is it's Organizational Culture and Leadership Institute, OCLI.org. And that's our website. And you can reach me through that. And if you have questions for John Van Manen, who's one of the other co-authors, you can reach me. You can reach him through me as well.
Brilliant.
He's still a professor at MIT,
Oh, very good.
and he's had a lot of experience teaching this to Sloan Fellows, to students.
Yeah.
So my perspective is relatively fresh compared to his. He's got
Yeah.
years of experience
He's been
deeply
talking about
embedded
it for
in
a long
this.
time. Yeah, yeah,
I'm trying to just get people using it as
yeah,
a, as an again a careerfulness
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
and
Careerfulness, love it.
and use it in comparison to the other ones, because there's
Yeah,
lots of other good assessments out there. It's just how can you get more insights into who you are, because it'll help you in an interview, it'll help you with a tough decision,
yeah,
it'll help you just sort of feel a better sense of who you are when you finish a day of work.
absolutely. And Peter, the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast: what does being happier at work mean to you?
Well, I think again in this context, in talking about career anchors, it is that sense of groundedness. Like, all right, um, if I'm feeling uncomfortable, let me sort of repaint my spider web in my mind
Mm,
and remember kind of who I am, what kind of decisions I've made, um, so that I feel grounded. I don't feel like you know, my skills or my personality are in any way threatened. I'm comfortable in my own skin because I understand my own skin.
brilliant. Love that. Thank you so much for your time today, sharing your wisdom, sharing the insights from the book. I really, really appreciate that. Loved having this chat today as well. So thank you so much.
Likewise, it's great to see you again, and thank you for your interest. In fact, our second edition of Humble Leadership is coming out in a few weeks, and so maybe I should go book another hour, Eve. Is that all
There
right?
you go. Yeah. Talk about the update there. Brilliant. Love it. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Peter.
All right. Thank you. Great pleasure.